Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're in day 164 of the ongoing war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And we're going to start off today's look-see at what is continuing in this ongoing vicious war that is taking place between these two parties. And as always, we're going to start in the eastern front of the operations. We continue to see the Russians pushing towards two main cities right now that they are very much focused on in seizing control of. That is Bakhmut right here, where my cursor is circling. We are seeing Russian forces continue to push along the M3 highway and south of the M3. Approaching Bakhmut from both the east and the south as well. And further to the south, we continue to see Russian forces making gains and pushing towards the fortified town of Avdiivka. And as we had talked about yesterday, the Russians are attempting to encircle Avdiivka from the northwest, while at the same time pushing towards Avdiivka's south as well. We have heard reports that Ukrainian positions in and around Avdiivka may have found themselves in a very, very dire circumstance as Russian heavy artillery continues to pound those forces, and it would appear that Ukrainian morale, especially those forces located in and around Avdiivka, may be waning at this point. And again, these are just anecdotal reports coming out of the region in which Ukrainian force personnel are discussing the ongoing conflict to various poll reporters and such. But again, the Russians right now are making concerted efforts towards Avdiivka and then again towards Bakhmut. And you'll notice this gray area right here. Again, we believe right now the Russians have probably pushed up towards the outskirts of Bakhmut and are probably very, very close to actually entering the town, at least on a limited basis within the coming possibly hours and days. But we'll have to continue to monitor and see what happens as the Ukrainians continue to resist. And again, I've just transferred obviously over to the satellite view where you can kind of see the size of Bakhmut and just how close the Russians now are into breaking into the city. If we go up further to the northwest, we have reports of the Ukrainians pushing back against Russian forces towards the city of Izum. And we have reports, obviously, that we have talked about previously that indicate Russia may have withdrawn some of its forces from these areas and redeployed those forces on the western bank of the Dnieper River in anticipation or to stop the limited ongoing counteroffensive by the Ukrainian armed forces in this area. But possibly because of some of those force withdrawals near Izum, Russian forces may have been pushed back in this area. Now, there's no major towns. The terrain is a mixed bag of forests and open fields that are somewhat dispersed with additional forested and heavy foliaged areas. And what I'll do here is allow you, the viewer, to see what has happened over the course of the last, we'll go back to the 25th of June, and obviously the Russian position was a bit forward compared to where they are now. And if I fast forward that, you will see how the Ukrainians have been able to push back. Now, some of these areas are still disputed. We can't confirm that these are under Ukrainian control as of yet. And then if we move this area, you can see that Ukrainians have probably pushed forward about a kilometer or two south of the city of Izum. If we do the same with the area near Bakhmut, and again, I had done this yesterday, but we'll do it again, and we'll go back all the way to the 20th of July, and we will fast forward, and this again gives you an idea of how the Russians are progressing and what they are trying to do within the context of attacking the area near Bakhmut, and it shows you that it is a fairly key objective for Russian forces at this point. And then we're just going to forward. So again, continued reports of tremendous amounts of heavy artillery being used by Russian forces. We have also received reports that indicate the Russians have started to deploy Iranian-made medium-sized unmanned combat aerial vehicles against Ukrainian forces. It's a little odd that the Russians would be utilizing Iranian-made drones, but it kind of gives you an idea of just how far behind the Russians are in terms of the deployment, manufacturing of unmanned combat aerial vehicles. And it also shows you that the Russians are now understanding their value as an instrument of war. I would assume that the Russians will catch up relatively quickly in terms of reverse engineering some of these systems that the Iranians are using, and obviously the Iranians are reverse engineering Chinese and U.S.-made systems as well. So I would say within the next year we will probably see additional Russian assets being deployed in the form of combat drones, additional combat drones by the Russians being deployed in this conflict if it continues to continue. And if we head down towards Kherson and Zaporizhia, we continue to hear about Russian heavy multiple launch rocket attacks towards Nikopol and other areas such as Zaporizhia and Mykolaiv as well, located in this area. We continue to also hear about the Indihar nuclear power facility, one of the largest nuclear power facilities, if not the largest nuclear power facility. Here you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reactors. And again, due to the ongoing fighting, we have heard reports and received reports that shells continue to land within the vicinity of the nuclear power plant. Both sides continue to lay blame that the other is launching shells towards the power plant. The Russians obviously control the power plant, and it just does not seem reasonable why the Russians would shell a nuclear power plant that they occupy. Now, that's what the Ukrainians are alleging, but at the same time, the Russians are alleging the Ukrainians are shelling the power plant. So, again, within the realm of what is reasonable, given the fact that the Russians are on the ground in Indihar, it seems more reasonable that the shelling would have come from Ukrainian sources. Again, if there was some sort of catastrophic failure within the power plant, obviously those Russian forces within the confines of the power plant would be directly affected by whatever would happen to the power plant. But that pretty much sums it up for today. We continue to monitor and will continue to report the ongoing fighting that is taking place. It is still much a very, very vicious state of affairs as both sides continue to slug it out, and the Russians continue to push forwards, especially in the eastern areas of the country of eastern Ukraine. But again, that sums it up for today. We'll have more very, very soon. Again, thank you for joining us.